The United States President-elect Donald Trump is set to take his oath of office for the second time today. As tradition, the inauguration day will be filled with ceremonies as one president leaves the White House and another moves in, but questions linger about the future of South Africa's diplomatic ties with the United States. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Dr. Samuel Oyewole, a research fellow at the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria, and he's joining us now live from Nigeria. A very good morning to you, Doctor, and thank you so much for making time for us this morning. So as Trump takes his oath of office again for a second time, what is it that we should be looking out for? Some people may even argue that, listen, a foreign policy might not even be at the center of that particular address, but would foreign policy be at the center of the Trump administration, and what would that look like?
Thank you for having me. To start with, there are so many indications that the Trump administration is going to prioritize foreign policy. So many public statements and moves recently have shown that that is going to prioritize foreign policy. And a number of other like the invitation sent out to foreign leaders, like invitation to China from Africa, shows that it's going to prioritize foreign policy. And what we can look out for generally as African from the new administration include issue of its disposition towards democratic promotion on the continent, issue of its disposition towards economic relation, bilateral economic relation, which is some analysts have described as likely to tend towards more transactional than issue of bloc engagement, is disposition towards issue of climate change, which he does not really have strong belief in. Again, his disposition towards counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency on the continent. There's more likelihood for Trump to provide more support for many countries that are facing insurgency and terrorism based on his track record in his first tenure. Again, there are concerns that issues like support for Palestinians by some African countries, especially South Africa, may attract consequences from policy response from Washington under Trump. There's so many issues that we can look at for. Issue of immigration is another thing. There's a growing concern that many Africans may face deportation, especially those in the class of illegal immigrants in the US. Yeah. So these are some of the issues that we look at for.
Do you think that from a diplomatic perspective and also the mediation role that was played during the Trump administration, if you take it for an example, that standoff between Egypt as well as Ethiopia around the Nile River, do you think that we could still see the United States under the Trump administration wanting to play such a mediation role once again?
Well, there's a growing complexity around the position of U.S. in this kind of contest recently, especially with the growing advocacy in Trump's circle to acquire Greenland, to take over Panama Canal, and the remote one to add Canada to the growing expansionist orientation of many pro-Trump foreign policy analysts and advocates. With that kind of development, it may become quite challenging for the U.S. to mediate territorial dispute, issue that concerns territorial dispute, including the one that involves Ethiopia and Egypt. So this may even embolden countries with expansionist policy, foreign policy, to also take action in this regard. And that may have implications for Ethiopia, Egypt-Ethiopian relation, as well as the recent stability that we witnessed with Somalia and Ethiopia over issue of Somaliland and the attempt by Ethiopia to have access to the sea.
Yeah. Then also, Trump returns to power under very different conditions which he left the African continent under, if you were to take such a description, is looking at the number of coups that have taken place and also the number of administrations that are still under military rule. What would that mean, especially for West Africa, around its engagement and the understanding of some of the support that has come from the United States, specifically with the aid and training of the military?
Okay, in time of Trump's disposition towards that, Trump may not necessarily emphasize issue of democratization and human rights as a basis for its relation with Africa, and that may actually be to the favor of some of these countries under military rule. That include Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Again, Trump emphasis on security as well as support for counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency in Africa may also favor this country. Another thing that may shape Trump's disposition towards Africa in this regard is its relation with Russia and China. If Trump is able to record headway in his promised approach to Russia-Ukraine conflict, he may be able to stabilize relations with Russia. And then Russia is the main backer of some of these countries under military rule in Africa. So such stability in U.S.-Russia relation may actually affect or influence its engagement with this pro-Russian oriented country. Again, its attempt, despite the rhetoric of trade war, tariff, and all those things with China, we can see a new and emerging reapproachment and re-engagement with China, with the invitation extended to the Chinese government to attend the inauguration. So with that kind of reapproachment, there's tendency that this and other engagement may stabilize relations between the two countries with significant implication for Africa. So these countries that are pro-China, pro-Russia have the tendency to benefit from this reapproachment with China and Russia under Trump.
Yeah, and now also, if you look, for instance, at just how the whole TikTok thing is being dealt with, and the promise that has come from Trump that once he is in office, to give some leeway to TikTok. But the big question there would still remain whether ByteDance is willing to forgo at least 50% of its controlling stake of ByteDance. In the absence of that, how should we understand the role of an Elon Musk? Because we've seen the remarks that have been made by Elon Musk as well, and he has played quite an important role in Trump's victory. And that is, for example, the other day he asked that if TikTok is not allowed in the US, then we also need to have this conversation about why you have X not being allowed in China as well. So on the other end, you see private interest being pushed as well. And I wonder whether Trump is able to, I don't know, almost ensure that the United States and its administration is insulated from those private interests.
I'm not sure the Trump administration can avoid or can develop such capacity to insulate itself from private interest. The U.S. government and foreign policy has always been influenced by private interest across time. However, it's becoming more obvious and concentrated in few non-traditional private interests. In the past, U.S. interests have been shaped by OFM that operate across the world in the Middle East and Africa. And in many cases, Africa, the U.S. military and development aids have been shaped by this private interest. But now we are having or experiencing more influence or more assertive policy orientation towards the high-tech private interest, as we can see in the case of Elon Musk. And that's why there may be policy orientation to support more aggressive SpaceX inroad in Africa and other parts of the world as well, apart from the case of China and the whole debate around TikTok in the US.
Should South Africa be worried at all, considering its stance against Israel as well, with that ICJ matter?
I think so. I think so. However, there's always a diplomatic way to go around all this.
There's a diplomatic way to go around it. Thank you so much for making time for us. That is Dr. Samuel Oyewole, who is from the University of Pretoria there, a research fellow at the African Center for Study on the United States at the University of Pretoria. Thank you so much for making time for us.